Python tutorials. In this video, we are going to be working with libraries, specifically the Datetime library as well as the math library. In a previous video, we worked on the turtle graphic library video, so if you want to take a look at that, please feel free to do so. It might help. So in Python, there are so many things that you can do, so many functions, so many objects, all sorts of things, right? But it can't possibly contain every single thing you want to do. And this is where libraries come in. Libraries are basically a whole different set of objects and functions of its own. And by importing that library into your program, you now have all those functions, all that information, all those things that you could do, and it's now brought into your program. So your program essentially has you've unlocked a whole new box of information, essentially. So let's go in and work with the Datetime library. Just like its name, the Datetime library is a library that works with your dates and times and things like that. We're going to work on printing out the date and time now. So let's go to repl it, so repl.it, and click the blue Start Coding button in our IDE here and choose Python. We run and create our repl, and we'll get started. So the first thing we always have to do is import our library. So many people go in and then they forget to import their library, but it's so important because if you don't tell your program that you're importing a library, how is it supposed to know? So we need to come up here and we're going to say import datetime. Now datetime is a library name. As you'll see, Python is telling us that datetime is imported but unused. So we're going to go ahead and use it. First thing that we're going to do is we're going to set it equal to my time, x is equal to datetime.now. Now before you guys get all confused on me, wait, let's break this down. The first example, the reason why I chose this to do it with you is because it's slightly differently formatted from other libraries, but it's a great way to kind of give you a little prelude into objects. This first datetime is the library because you're telling it I'm going to use something from the datetime library. So this first datetime is the library. The second datetime is the datetime object in the library. So don't get confused, just because they look the same doesn't mean that they're the same thing. The first one is the library, the second one is the object in the library, the third one is the function. The now is just a function that does something. And we will talk about objects in some next videos, but all you guys need to know is that this first one is the datetime library telling it that we're going to use something from this library. The second one is an object in the library, and the third one is the function called now. And what now does is going to give you the date and the time right now. So now we can go and print out X to see what our date and time right now. Now warning, it's not going to be the same as what you see on your clock, and we'll explain why in a second. So let's run our code, and we get, okay, so right now it is November 1st, 2020, but it is not 8:56 p.m. For me, it's 2:56 p.m. Now, here's the reason. Time zones. I am in Central Time, so naturally for me it's 2:56, but this repl, the Python program, goes by the UTC time zone. So we can go, the UTC is like somewhere in Europe, I believe. So you can say, what is UTC time now? And it's going to say 8:57 p.m. You run it again and it gets 8:57. Remember, this is military time, so it says 20:57, but that's the same as 8:57. So we can see that we've successfully printed out the date and the time in UTC time successfully. So we've done it. So again, we imported our datetime library. We said use the datetime library, use the object called datetime, and use the function called now. So that was the datetime library. The next library that we are going to work with is the math library. So the math library is, well, math, just like the name, right? So I want to bring to your attention that Python already has a few math things in in its own program. For example, the POW function, to use powers, we don't need to import a library for that. It's already in the program. The absolute value function is already inside of Python. I forgot what it was called for a second. I was like, the absolute value, what is it called? A function. There we go. It's a function. It's already included in Python. However, the ceil and floor functions have not been imported into Python. The square root function has not been imported into Python. So we need to import a library to do that. But before we do that, I'm just going to do the POW and ABS function just to see that we don't really need a library to do those. This is going to be a little bit of math over here, but math and computer science are directly related, so I think we'll still have a good time doing this. So we can say A is equal to POW, and then you can see that Replit is prompting you. It wants you to give a base and an exponent. We're going to work with the base and the exponent now. So for example, 2 to the 4th power is 2 times 2 times 2 times 2, 4 times. And in this case, the base would be 2, so the bottom number is 2. And the tiny number at the top is the exponent. So we would say 2, 4 is basically essentially 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. That is essentially what it is. We can print out A to see what it does, and we will get 16, because 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 is 16. Next one, we are working with the absolute value function, and that is just ABS. The absolute value, in case you haven't learned it before in math, is basically the distance from 0. How I like to think about it is whatever number you give, it's the positive value of that. For example, the absolute value of negative 3 is 3. The absolute value of 3 is 3. The absolute value of negative 4 and 3/4 is 4 and 3/4. The absolute value of positive 4 and 3/4 is still positive 4 and 3/4. So it's basically the distance from 0. So absolute value of negative 5.68, and then we can print out B. And we are going to get 5.68. The absolute value of positive 4 is 4. Right? So those were just two of the math functions that were kind of a prelude to what we're going to do. But now we're going to get into our math library. And so in order to do that, what is the first thing we need to do? We need to import our math library. And the math library is just math. So what we're going to do is we can close out of UTC time. And we're going to let's do ceil and floor first. So ceil rounds up because ceilings are up, right? Floor rounds down because floor is on the ground, right? That's how I remember it. So let's see here. We can say y is equal to math.ceil. And so this is important because since we're using the math library, we need to say math dot. Otherwise, it's not going to know that we're taking a function from the math library. So math.ceil. So this is essentially saying for the variable y, go into the math library, take the function called ceil, and find the ceil of, let's say, 4.2. Now, since we're rounding up, this is going to give us 5, right? Now let's work on the floor function. It's the same thing. You still have to use the math library and then floor. Now, we can do 3.99999. So this is very, 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 very close to 4, guys, but not quite. So since floor is rounding down, it's going to give us 3. Remember, this is saying go to your math library and use the floor function. So we can print out y and z. We're going to do this on the same line. And we're going to get 5 and 3, like we said before. Last thing we're going to be working with is the square root function. So I'm going to say c is equal to math dot because it's in the math library. The square root function comes from the math library. SQRT is the name for the square root function. And a perfect square, let's say 100, because we all know that 10 times 10 is 100. So it's going to return us the square root of 100. And it's going to give us 10.0. right? So now we've basically gone over 2 libraries. We've gone over the Datetime library. We've gone over the math library. Libraries are like important assets to our Python program. And they're very, very important to use. And we learned about how to find the time now. We learned about the ceiling and floors and the square root function, all of those things like that. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I will see you next week for some more. Bye, guys.